From the Sky News Centre, this is Paul Murray Live.
Thank you, Dee. I want you to think about what it's like every single Saturday night in Australia during summer. You've got your family around you and you decide, I've got to quickly pop to the shops and get something. You may well have the grandkids over, so you take one of them with you. Well, as you know, there was a situation that took place not too far from Ipswich on Saturday night, when a lady called Vilene White was killed. She was killed for no reason whatsoever. She was killed because she had left her car in the car park. She had gone up the escalators, and like many people do, you think, oh, have I locked the car? She turns around, she comes back to the car, and there are people trying to steal that car. She is stabbed and fatally killed in front of her 6-year-old granddaughter. Now, we've learnt a little bit about Vilene in the past couple of days, but she is somebody that we would recognise as a member of our own family. The type of person that when they come home from that quick Saturday run to the shops, when they get home, beep, beep, the message sent to everyone inside to come and help empty the car. She was a proud believer in God and was ready to lead a Bible study group. She has a couple of daughters, she has grandchildren, and she's had a husband for the past 50 years. 6 p.m. on a Saturday. Bright daylight. You quickly run to the shops and then you never come home. Your granddaughter will be old enough to remember what she has seen. And tonight, over on A Current Affair, her husband of 50 years spoke about the feelings inside that family. And like you, I have no idea how you can put a sentence together when something like this happens, let alone the strength to find words like this. But he did tonight on Channel 9.
Well, when this particular animal stabbed my wife, right, he stabbed 4 of us in the heart. So he didn't just kill her, he killed 4 of us with her. Justice has to be done.
Victor is vision impaired. It doesn't take a genius to work out the role that his wife played in him being able to get around. The bond that they had in faith, but also in family. Again, I'm off to the shop style. Okay, see you later, if you say anything at all. And then they never come home. And what took place in and around that time was the fatal mistake that we would all make, which is to go back to your car to double check what's going on. Again, a bit more from Victor tonight on A Current Affair.
What do you think of those people who came to help?
Well, they went above, automatic reaction, to assist somebody who's in need at that particular time.
When Vilene's family was talking tonight, you could see the obvious shock, the obvious heartbreak, but you could also see how a normal family deals with a horrific tragedy, when nobody knows what to say, what to do, where to go. But one of Vilene's daughters has said that she's going to try to wrap her arms around the family as her mother did, particularly to take care of her father.
I get the fear. I fear. The first night, I could not sleep. I didn't know if they were going to turn up here. I was just literally, my siblings and I, we just did not sleep.
Now, this story is too common, and that's what makes it particularly frightening. You'll constantly be told by experts in crime that the extreme majority of crimes are not random like this. Instead, violence often happens inside the home from somebody that you know. And while that might be statistically correct, there is still a significant group of people whose lives are changed forever because of the random actions of a complete stranger. Now, we've spoken on this show for a long time about youth crime and crime in general, because unlike the crime statisticians, the politicians who often try to present these as being better than they really are, they turn around and say things like 40,000 people being assaulted in any 1 year in a place like New South Wales is stable because it's 100 higher or it's 100 lower. But the reality is it's a football stadium of people that have been assaulted. You'll never forget it. For obvious reasons, this family will never be the same. And we send them nothing but strength and love to try to find the way to cope, to try to find the way to hold themselves together. But the issue of youth crime, in particular in Queensland, has been out of control for too long. Politicians fiddle the numbers to make it seem like times are better than what they are. Remember, I've explained in great detail to you how the Queensland government decided to decriminalise drug possession, and drug possession is 10% of the youth crime picture. So therefore, when the anniversary comes around after that decision, they'll be able to say the youth crime rate's down by 10%. But the people in and around this crime, who have now been arrested and are now going through the court system, are people who are teenagers. There are 3 people that are 16. There are 2 that are 15. And while I'm limited in what I can say, but I feel everything that you feel right now, because how can you not imagine this would be your family? That I hope that justice is swift and is purposeful. But we've got to stop normalising the idea that in Australia, it's the type of place where you have to double check, did I lock the door? You have to double check, did I lock the car? When you do something like go to the shops for 5-10 minutes, something that you think is completely innocent can turn out to not be. Now, tonight on the show, we'll have a chat to the opposition leader, David Crisafulli, because yet again, the Labor government, which may well have changed its front person, it's the same team that has produced terrible results. They talk a big game, but the reality is often nothing to see in terms of actual improvement for people from the state of Queensland. So we'll have a chat to David a little bit later. But as for the police describing what happened here, these are some of the details that they released today.
To kill an elderly 70-year-old woman in front of her 6-year-old granddaughter, to me, as I was described last night, it's abhorrent, it's violent, and it is a cowardly crime like I have not seen in my time as a detective. Again,
Saturday night, 6 o'clock, bright outside. Darla, I'm just going to quickly go to the shops. Oh, Darla, do you want to come with me? 6-year-old granddaughter. The granddaughter sees her grandmother die. This is not okay. And these crimes matter because they shouldn't happen in a place like this. What happens to the people who police believe responsible will be a matter for a court. And again, I feel everything you feel, and I would like to say everything that you would say right now, but I wouldn't dare say a damn thing that is going to give any opportunity for anything other than a form of justice. But to Victor, Vylene's daughters and the wider family, strength and love from every other normal person who just goes about their life, believing in their family, we send you again nothing but strength and love. It's bloody awful, truly terrible. Now to what you come to expect from the show, and that's, of course, a chat about the day's politics. It is insignificant compared to what's been going on west of Ipswich, but let's get into it. Of course, today was the day when petrol prices, they went up by the best part of a cent per litre. The total cost now, when it comes to the amount of tax that you have to pay on your petrol, is now going to be $1,500 a year, but shh, don't tell anyone, because apparently tax cuts are going to be amazing. They'll fix everything. And as you know, Chris Bowen, he's out and about, bouncing about, suggesting that brand new rules that will determine what cars can and can't be sold in Australia will apparently not affect any cars that you can choose to buy in Australia. Garbage, really. But what I wanted to talk about tonight, because I did talk about this in some detail last night, it's a reminder to join us on Sunday nights as well, was the press release from the Minister. Now, this was deliberately timed to distract from the increase in petrol taxes that was taking place today, and largely, well, the media turned around and fell for it. Because there was this grab, which was also offered up by the Infrastructure Minister, Catherine King, that was the head of the press release.
We know that by 2028 this will save average consumers on each vehicle each year over $1,000.
Notice the fine print? I'll get to that in a second. But what did our media decide to cover? Well, surprise, surprise. Did they cover the increase in petrol tax today, or were they talking up a potential petrol saving years down the track? Were they put simply running government spin or telling you the reality of what this government was doing, which is increasing your tax today?
Modelling shows that by 2028, Australians could be saving up to $1,000 per car per year.
Australians will save up to $1,000 annually,
saving about $1,000 a year,
and is expected to lower petrol bills.
This is an announcement about a system that doesn't kick in until the middle of the year, but doesn't really get going until next year. And as the fine print in the press release shows, it doesn't even really kick in until the year 2028. Now, again, in the blink of our lives, that is a relatively short period of time. But in terms of immediate need to reduce petrol prices, the federal government should have been announcing today a reversal in their decision to increase petrol excise. They should be making the same announcement ahead of what is due to happen in August. Remember, twice a year, petrol goes up according to inflation. And while the government will say that inflation is under control, the reality is that because prices keep going up, then so do the taxes that they take on things like petrol, on things like tobacco, and things like alcohol. But to give you an idea of 2028, there's the Olympics this year, and then that's 4 years after that, when Los Angeles will be having the Olympic Games, is when you will potentially, maybe, if you buy one of these cars, a brand new car in 2028, is when you may potentially save $1,000. By the way, by 2028, Joe Biden will be a mere 86 years of age. Australia's population will be 28 million people. And Anthony Albanese will, should he be successful at the next federal election, be going for his third term as Australian Prime Minister. It would also be 3 years in 2028 after he broke this promise by 2025.
Reducing power prices by $275.
By 2025, $275 a year.
$275 a year.
We'll get power prices down by $275 a year.
But no doubt, just like the broken tax promise, you have the media will be focusing more so on what does this mean for Peter Dutton. They truly think you are this stupid, that literally the message they feed to the media is about a saving maybe in 4 years' time versus the petrol tax that increased today. That is their decision today. Meantime, industry groups have responded saying, yeah, this doesn't quite seem to be what they suggest it is. You see, many of the vehicles that just you will not be able to buy because they sit outside of all of these new fuel limits are things like Ford Everests and Rangers, Nissan Patrols and Pathfinders, also Hiluxes and Mitsubishi Tritons, the types of cars that Australians actually like to buy. In fact, according to the Australian Automotive Dealers Association, many utes and SUVs don't meet the target for next year, let alone the requirements by 29, which is going to be 60% lower than it is today. Meantime, to suggest that there will be as many options for consumers in this space in 5 years' time is overly optimistic. As Paul Grover told Peter Credlin tonight,
what Minister Bowen has completely forgotten about is that the reason we couldn't have this standard up until now has got nothing to do with electric cars. It's got to do with the fact that the fuel in Australia is not suitable for use with those European latest emission standards.
And the newer versions of fuel, which are apparently going to be cleaner, guess what? It costs more to refine. So the petrol will be more expensive than even the expensive petrol that we have now. Of course, all of this is about trying to get us to an electric vehicle future, but it's one that Australians aren't picking up by the dozen, as you would assume if you read some parts of the media, which is why the federal government has decided to put the luxury car tax onto hybrid vehicles. I keep talking about this because nobody else is mentioning it. And any hybrid vehicle, and remember there was about 100 and something thousand hybrids that were sold to about 80,000 electric vehicles. Anything over $75,000, every dollar over that will end up with a 33-cent tax because apparently it's a luxury car. Meantime, of course, there is the issue of how things move around Australia. Now, the federal government has already decided to introduce a new piece of taxation about heavy vehicle haulage around the country. It means the cost of moving things around the country will increase. But of course, in Canberra land, the food just apparently grows inside your local supermarket. Now, according to local truckies, this one from Gippsland says that it's going to cost about $40,000 a year extra to stay on the road. Many smaller trucking companies won't be able to do it, so they will, of course, go out of business. So big unions and big business will get together again with big government and they get even a bigger slice of the pie. But in Victoria, there is a conversation happening as we speak about even further increasing the amount that it costs for things to move from the Port of Melbourne, around Melbourne, and then out to the rest of Victoria. Jacinta Allen, the Victorian Premier, is apparently seriously considering a new proposal that would add between $150 to $250 to any truck that wishes to drive freight out of the Port of Melbourne. The trucks will be slugged with a tiered tax of $150 to $250 per container. Now remember, trucks can take a couple, so you can easily see how this money's going to add up. Because you see, about 1 million visits to the Port of Melbourne happen each and every year from trucks. If you're going to slug them $150 to pick up just one container, or maybe $250 for one container, and they're able to take 2 or 3, you can see what's going to happen here. All of it is about trying to, well, do the truckies out of business. The plan here is to try to get as much freight moving by rail as possible. But as you know, regardless of whether you're in suburban Melbourne or regional Victoria, not every supermarket has a train station attached to it. So at some point in time, somebody is going to have to put it on the back of the truck. Whether or not they will still have to pay the same fee or not, we'll all find out together. But put this together with the federal government and their increases on taxes that are being paid by truckies, it means that whatever's inside those containers is going to cost more. And you see, the government works out that if it's just $150, it doesn't really matter. But when you add it up by the more than 1 million trucks that go in and out, times, say, 1, 2, or maybe even 3 containers, depending on how big the truck is, you can see how we start to get to a very big chunk of change sooner rather than later. Again, decisions made by people who have no idea how the real world actually works. And they think you're stupid enough to be distracted by a potential saving of $1,000 if you buy a new car 4 years from now. And the media helps them spread their spin. Meantime, even more talk about tax this evening. Now, a group of people have got together and are demanding that there should be a brand new tax on sugar in Australia. Now, for obvious reasons, the big bloke on the telly, well, he's got his plenty fair share of sugar. But the suggestion here now is that we must have a sugar tax because Australians are too fat and it costs too much money when fat people go to hospital.
Anything that we can do to reduce consumption of sugary drinks will reduce the overall population's risk of cancer.
The Heart Foundation supports a tax on manufacturers of sugary drinks to encourage them to reduce the sugar content in their products.
It's time that the Australian government stepped up and implemented this policy, putting Australians' health over company profits.
Every part of your life, they find a new way to tax. The old joke about taxing on breathing, well, wouldn't be that long. You see, your job is not to be a citizen. Your job is not to have a government that reflects your will. Your job is to shut up and pay your tax. That's it. Your job is to be dependent on government via welfare, or if you run a business, that your biggest customer is the government, or for a job you work for the government. You see, this is the whole plan, is that eventually you become so dependent on government that you will never stand up to government. The people who operate in small business, well, bugger them. They're the losers who decide to work too hard for themselves. As for the food, well, apparently it will just magically appear and not be particularly tasty to eat. Now, also on cost of living, today the Brotherhoods of St Lawrence decided to release a new report, and it is again about cost of living and how tough people are finding it right now. The reason I mention this is not because you haven't heard the message a million times before, but after I just told you about a sugar tax, after I just told you about fuel tax, after I just told you about truckie tax, do you really believe the Prime Minister when he says that he's totally and always focused on the cost of living? Well, I don't either. Because in this report, it shows people who are on low-income wages or people who are on pensions, they continue to do it particularly tough. Here are just a couple of the examples of Albo's Australia. Emma is a 50-year-old single mother of two who's puzzled by the sharp increase of costs. I don't know. Before I seemed to manage fine, but now all of a sudden I'm not. I don't know why, whether it's the rising prices, because petrol is nearly double, so you can only put half a tank in, it costs double. I don't understand how it had to jump by that much. Then there's another one about food. This is Luke, he's 27 and he's on a pension. He's juggled self-employment with managing his health condition. He explained that he cut back on food for himself. He had sleep for breakfast, 2 meals if he's not working on a day, and only 1 meal a day if he is working. What about Joshua, a 22-year-old with 2 casual jobs? He relied on his medication to function well. Sometimes I'm not able to afford my medication. It really gets down to the wire, so I'm only, this sounds irresponsible, but before my parents were able to help, he only took half of his dose. And then there's Rachel, a single mother of 3. And she told the Brotherhood of St Lawrence, not a far right-wing charity, that we've not used the heater, even though it's been incredibly cold. I use thermal clothing, a scarf and a jacket so I don't have to pay for extra electricity for heating. You see, this is what frankly pisses me off about the constant refrains that come out of Canberra. The garbage, the BS and the spin, that they really care about the people who are doing it most tough in the country. They're the people who tell us that a tax cut of $14 a week is going to be enough to turn somebody's life around on $45,000. But the reality is it's not. It's never going to be able to save those people's lives. It's not going to change their living conditions at all. Instead, it's all about the politics. And you see, in the end, the people who talk about politics for a living on television, radio and write for it in the newspapers, or the people who participate for a living as political staffers or the MPs or the ministers, they only care about the politics. So despite the fact that life is as hard as it has ever been in Australia, throw on top of that the lack of safety that exists in the very communities that are supposedly being taken care of by these people, forgive me if I don't fall for the spin, because I know you don't either. Quick break, back with more. Great debate ahead here with Nicholas Rees and Senator Matt Canavan. Tomorrow, big protest in Canberra from people who've had enough of regional Australia being the dumping grounds for the Teal seats' inability to take care of their own green electricity. More in a sec. Goodness me, I'm just reading on the Courier Mail's website about the one of the court proceedings involving teenagers in relation to that crime I was talking about with the death of Vilene White. According to the Courier Mail tonight, a court hearing for a juvenile allegedly linked to the stabbing of the 70-year-old was closed to the public because it would, quote, be confronting for the child. What about the 6-year-old? Anyway, let's get to this right now. None other than Matt Canavan is, of course, National Senator representing the beautiful state of Queensland, and the wonderful Nicholas Rees joining us from the city of Melbourne, of which he is the Deputy Mayor. So, lads, tomorrow, let's see what happens here, but there's a lot of people that are planning to come to Canberra. I hope that they do turn up. I hope it's not just, bark without bite here, and by bite I mean metaphorically turning up. Don't go running off, say, insurrection talk on Sky News the night before something does or doesn't outcome, and settle all that crap down right? Going, I know how this game works. I'm fighting tomorrow's battle tonight, right? But, Matt, they are going to turn up, and they are going to turn up because the reality of where renewable energy needs to be built is in the places where they live and work. And even if their property is not directly affected, their neighbour's property may be the one that sells out, and that, of course, what ends up impacting on them. What do you reckon tomorrow's turnout is? Are we expecting a couple of dozen passionate people, or is this going to be something that will force the wider media to actually pay attention?
Look, I don't know, Paul. You never know with these things. There's a lot of anger out there in the bush, but obviously all of these people that are angry tend to have jobs and farms to look after, so it's a big effort to get to Canberra. Weather's not so great here either, but if you're in the local area, get along. We need those people to have their voice said. And look, whatever happens tomorrow, I know and predict that the left-wing media will paint all these guys as far right-wing nut jobs, but you don't need a rally to show what is exactly happening out there in the bush. There was actually a government-issued report on Friday, lobbed on Friday afternoon, dropped on Friday afternoon by the Climate Change Minister. It was his review into the community engagement that renewable energy companies do with landowners. They surveyed 250 landowners and people in the community who live near wind or solar projects, and 90% of them are unhappy with how these projects are being developed right now. They don't believe they're getting answers. They don't appreciate the engagement they're getting with these project developers. 90%, 9 in 10. I mean, you would find, I reckon you'd find more support in central Queensland for the New South Wales Rugby League team than you would for renewable energy right now.
Well, let's talk about that report, because let's have a look here, right? 92% of respondents say they're dissatisfied with the extent to which project developers engage the local community. 85% of respondents say they're dissatisfied with the explanations that are provided to them. 89% of respondents said that the information they received from project developers was not relevant, and 85% of people said that their concerns were not addressed in a timely manner. This is the whole game, Nicholas. Now, these people have every valid concern to turn up, and they're doing it because it's their part of Australia that is being changed forever. What do you say to these people?
Well, look, I understand that nobody likes inappropriate development, but development needs to happen so our country can move forward. And I hear people making allegations about reckless renewables, and I equally don't think anyone could support that, but the sensible, timely rollout of renewables is something that should happen, and it's good for Australia if it does happen. I mean, Matt's told us about all the farmers who are unhappy about the rollout of renewable energy, but there are plenty of farmers out there who are very happy about it and making very good money. I mean, there are farmers that can make $40,000 per turbine per year. And they can still, graze on their properties. They can still farm their properties, and it becomes a very, very valuable source of additional income. While at the same time providing clean and renewable energy for the rest of Australia. So doing their bit for the country as well. So I think there's a lot to like about the rollout of renewables, but it's got to be done in the right way.
It's your patriotic duty, Matt, to sell out, and it's your patriotic duty to shut up whether you don't sell out.
It's not.
Well, Nick's not
selling out at all, Paul. Look, we've got a big...
Go, Matt.
We've got a big job to do as a country with the transition to renewable power, and farming Australia got a role to play. We've all got a role to play.
They didn't vote for it. Instead, they're being directly punished because they vote for the members who don't want this transition at this speed, Senator.
Well, Nick's right. We've got to grow and develop. The problem is we shouldn't be destroying the environment in the process. I mean, one of these particular projects, the Kalapa Wind Farm, it will generate about a tenth of the electricity of a coal-fired power station that is just around the corner from that wind farm, except it takes up 10 times the land area. So 10% of the power for 10 times the land area destroyed than the coal-fired power station. And if you went for a nuclear power station, you'd be another tenth less impact on the environment. And so I get really frustrated here with all these so-called environmentalists. We're going to save the planet by killing the environment. We're going to apparently try and save the polar bear by killing koala bears. It doesn't make any sense, Nick. And the only way you can make this add up is that a lot of people, a lot of banks, a lot of foreign investors are making a lot of money on the back of this. And that's why they want this to proceed, because if you really cared about carbon emissions, if you really cared about the environment, you'd be building nuclear power stations. They have a lower environmental footprint and they have no carbon emissions as well. But the fact there's no money to be made from banks and foreign investors in those facilities. That's why they want to go down the renewable path.
But Nicholas, don't you admit that, that okay, yes, there's a big job to be done, and what is it, 22,000 solar panels a day, but at some point in time, you're actually going to run out of volunteers?
No, I think Australia's a huge country and there have been numerous studies done on this, and we have not only the capability of generating plenty of renewable power for Australia and Australians, but we've got the capacity to become a international renewable energy superpower and power other nations in our region. I mean, you can do offshore wind as well, which is proving hugely popular in Europe, and I think it's got huge prospects
it's a failure
in Australia.
Everywhere.
And I do think
offshore
actually that's where a lot more effort should be made. I mean, Matt, I reckon you're a great bloke, but I'm sorry, you're just ideologically blinded when it comes to debating renewable power, because you're just so in love with coal. You're just so enraptured by coal. You're so enamoured by coal that you can't see that the world is moving on. And, you know, you can keep there saying, you know, trumpeting about the advantages of coal, but the truth is that renewable energy is, once it's installed, it's free, it's clean, and we need to do it because it's better, more efficient, and it's going to help the planet as well.
All right, Nick, I've got one for you here, right? So in the city of Melbourne, you've had plenty of time to be aware of development, right? And there are these fine moments where you have to decide whether a development goes ahead because you think there's going to be some economic benefit, or there's a huge community response because they don't want that building in that place, or they don't want that thing redeveloped in that size, right? It's not a 100-to-1 scenario where you always back the development. There are times when you end up backing the locals. Surely there are some scenarios here where if people are this angry and between 85 and 92% of people are saying that the consultation process doesn't work, then there is a problem with the way we are rolling this out. Would you admit that at least?
So I absolutely admit that there are planning mistakes that have been made around new renewable energy facilities. Of course, not every wind turbine might be in a location where it needs to be. Not every solar panel is necessarily being put in the right place. You know, the other week we discussed a town where they put a huge, they proposed to put a huge solar farm right by the entrance to the town. So, of course, just like you can have inappropriate development, you can have renewable energy projects that are inappropriate, but I would put it to you that the vast majority are appropriate and doing good for our nation. So, you know, we need to keep perspective and balance on these things, and the move towards renewable power is a very good thing for Australia.
But again, Matt, what we will see tomorrow is going to be that perfect example about how the media engages, right? I mean, I remember when your colleague and our friend, Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price, literally brought people from the middle of the country to Canberra to tell their stories about how organisations had looked them over. She literally went organisation to organisation to organisation, not interested. They don't want the chat, right? We know that tomorrow, if some of these people outside end up on the inside of the parliament and somebody yells out liar, then we'll have stories instantly off into which Nationals MP signed in the person who yelled liar in the parliament. Like, you can see that the deck is stacked against people so much so that they feel they have to come to Canberra, and even when they come to Canberra, they're not going to be treated in the same way that previous protests out the front of Parliament are counted.
And that's a symptom of the fact that our politics is broken, our democracy is broken, Paul, because this place, Canberra, is a place that lectures people, doesn't listen to people anymore. I mean, when these people come here, they'll get a lecture from the Labor Party, from bureaucrats saying, you don't know how good you've got it. This is fantastic. This renewable energy is so good. What are you complaining about? These are the same people that would never have a wind turbine or a solar farm in their backyard. They'd never agree to that. But they want to impose on others and they don't want to listen to people. And we're going to continue to divide and be divided as a country unless we start listening to people, listening to those people who are upset with the voice proposal. There was no listening to it. That people just rammed on with the proposal. So you'll like it or
hang on.
Have it.
I mean, I'm sorry.
Well, hang on. That's why they lost, Nick. And the same thing's going to happen here. Unless you listen to people, you're going to lose this. They will. You're absolutely wrong that you won't run out of volunteers. It's already happening. A solar farm at Moree got knocked back. The solar farms and wind turbines all around the world being knocked back because of community opposition. All politics is local. And if this place, if Canberra doesn't start to listen
I'm
to
sorry,
people,
Matt. I mean, I
this
think
backlash is only going to grow
And ironically,
grow
the Greens should be
and
at the
this
front
so-called
tomorrow.
energy transition that you're talking about will be a complete pipe dream.
Nick, super fast, mate.
Well, I just think the language you're using there, actually, Matt, is divisive. Like, let's wait and see, shall we? Let's give Aussie democracy the benefit of the doubt, and I do hope that those people that come tomorrow are listened to.
I didn't call them.
You sitting there talking up, you know, these people aren't going to be listened to. These people aren't cared for. These people are going to be talked down to. Like, hey, let's just wait and see.
Remember when the Prime Minister had to go out and meet the protesters out the front? Will Bowen be giving them a meeting tomorrow? We both know what the answer's going to be to that. Yeah, and the same people that were bleeding about that, they'll have nothing to say about this. All right, let's talk about these changes when it comes to cars, because, again, it's just the spin of things that just, I've got to say, it's one of those nights where I'm trying to hold it in, right? I'm really trying to hold it in, where we keep being told
Unleash,
about...
Paul. Unleash.
I'll give you the tip. You all know it's my final show when I start the show by lighting a cigar on air, all right? That's when I promise you, call friends and family, because that's the show you don't want to miss, all right? But I've got plenty left in the tank and a life in front of me, so I'm not planning to do it tonight. But we've got this scenario with these changes to cars. Now, again, I understand that the cars of yesterday are not automatically the solution for tomorrow, despite the fact that I bleed red, I love Holdens and I love Broom Brooms. I get the point of an electric car, but I also say let the market decide. The market is deciding and they're buying more hybrids than EVs, so bang, luxury car tax on them. And now this absolute rubbish that was served up yesterday, that as a distraction from Nicholas, you've got to love this as an old spin man, right? Petrol tax is going up. The government's excise goes up on Monday. So quick, get out there on Sunday and say in 4 years from now, if you buy the right car, you may save $1,000. And what did the media do? They repeated the spin.
Paul, I'm sorry, mate. Again, I think you've learned nothing. You're just stuck back there in 2019 with Scott Morrison saying it's the death of the weekend with electric vehicles. And Scott Morrison was wrong back then, and I'm sorry, mate, you're wrong tonight. I mean, Australia is the last country in the developing world. We are the last country in the world that has not adopted vehicle emission caps. We need to get with them. Oh, sorry, Russia. I know you got me there, Matt. Russia has also not introduced vehicle emission caps. So okay, with that technical conclusion, there we are.
I mean, Nick, you're talking about two different things. Nick, you're talking about two different things.
Why don't we all just agree? Why don't we just agree we'll just match the USA? Huh? Good old USA, home of the automobile. They've got stricter standards than we do. At least we could match them. At least we could match them.
Not right now, Nick.
This show's going to save you $1,000 a year. $7.
Oh, rubbish. In 4 years' time, maybe, if you buy a brand new car in 2027. Come on.
You've got to look at the whole of life costs, Paul.
Those US standards that you mentioned were introduced in 2021 by Joe Biden, and they're not due to kick in until the next few years. So there's no actual real-world evidence of their effect just yet. And they're also set at a level much higher than what the government's proposed here, about double the emission cap than what the government's proposed. But look, the broader point here is how come every time we have to go to this mythical net zero, we have to put on a new tax and we have to charge people more money? This is a tax. They're going to charge car companies if you sell too many utes, if you sell too many four-wheel drives, too many family vans, you have to pay a penalty under the government's proposal, a tax, because you're emitting too much carbon emissions. Now, if these EVs are so great, why don't people just buy them? I can't remember, Paul, Henry Ford going around shooting all the horses around so that people would buy the Model T. Yeah. I mean, they just sold because they were a good car and they made people go from A to B better. And if electric cars do that, great, fantastic, got no problem with it. Why do we have to always have more taxes, more government red tape, more regulation, more people telling us what to do? Let us just decide. Let people decide. Let us be a free country where people get to decide without these ridiculous taxes and imposts.
But again, I just love sort of the two-step shuffle here, right? Oh, we're not going to restrict anyone being able to buy whatever car they want to, unless, of course, you're in a jurisdiction like the ACT where you won't be able to buy a combustion engine car post-2030. Oh, no, but you'll be able to do whatever you want to do, just unless, of course, you live in this part of the country that has these rules or that part of the country. So, again, the idea that the media fell for it the day before petrol taxes going up shows you just how steep the climb is to get the truth out to people, but we'll try and do it each and every night, and that's why I'm so glad that you're here. Now, I've talked about this a little too regularly this year, which means probably I'm going to have to get even louder about it here, Senator, but it's problems with the Bureau. I see today Robert Gottliebson, among others, talking about some of the problems that are coming in with the Bureau at the moment and the fact that it is costing farmers an awful lot of money. Now, again, I'm not suggesting a Royal Commission into it. I'm not suggesting privatising it. I'm not suggesting handing it over to my mate Greg, who'll just make up the temperatures, right? But some of the forecasting is getting fairly regularly wrong, yet no one wants to talk about it.
Well, farmers are talking about it. There's no doubt about that. It has cost farmers a lot of money in the last 6 months. So I spoke to some over the break that had made decisions about to sell cattle based on the forecasts, and those forecasts have been wrong. Look, I always, agree with Yogi Berra that making predictions is very difficult, especially when they're about the future. It's really, really tough. It's not easy, and no organisation is going to get it right all the time. But there does seem to be a pattern here of the Bureau always beating up predictions or expectations, forecasts of a drought or certain natural disasters that are consistent with their climate change agenda. That's my problem here with this. And look, I know a lot of farmers now are just using private organisations instead of the Bureau. The more of them popping up now. That costs them money then to do that, rather than relying on what was previously a well-respected government service and public service. But it's, again, just an indication of a decline in trust in our institutions. And it's a real shame that there is a lot of damage being done to people's reputation because they clearly have an agenda. The Bureau has an agenda. You can agree with that agenda or disagree with it. They do have a climate change agenda, and it's colouring everything they do. All right, I've got a minute left here. Now, Nicholas, no doubt plenty of your friends. Why do you go on that bloke's show? Plenty of my friends. Geez, that Nicholas Rees. But there was another one of these. There was another one of these opinion pieces that popped up. When people just sort of spew half a few columns out and they go, "Great, that's enough," which basically is, people who disagree with you politically, you don't really want to be friends with them, and you definitely don't want to be in a relationship with them. I'll be really honest, right? I couldn't think of anything more boring than everyone in your life all thinking the one thing. Now, you and I will vehemently disagree on many ideas, but I don't doubt your basic humanity or how much you love your kids and vice versa. But geez, there's this strain of people, and I'm sorry I'm going to say it, often from the left, who always sort of talk about this, "Ooh, I can't be friends with you, you're a Trump supporter."
Well, I completely agree with you. We've all got families, don't we? And so pretty soon you're going to come across someone that you love who's probably got very different political views to you. It's certainly the case in my family with my mum and dad, and I probably are the better
God
person
love you, Mr. and
growing
Mrs.
up
Rees.
hearing that
God
diverse
love your mum and dad.
Range of
they secretly
of
watch
views.
and cheer
I
on
do
Matt.
think.
Keep going.
And look, I think we're a better people, we're a better society, we're a better country for a diversity of views, and it's important that we're able to have debates and do it in a civilised way and hopefully build a consensus ultimately around a particular view, and then we move forward. And that's how we build a great nation. Look, I do think one of the more worrying trends in contemporary politics, contemporary society, and I think this has got to do a little bit to do with technology, is that people sort of disappear into their bubbles, and so they're not getting exposed to a diversity of views. And so then when they hear a view that they haven't heard or they sort of disagree with, they almost can't handle it. So, yes, I think we've got to keep having robust debates and expose people to diversity of views.
And I repeat, on the behalf of the media, in either direction, if you hate watch, it counts just the same as love watching. The ratings in both directions. We do appreciate the haters that watch us each and every night, just desperate to run off to the umpire they are. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, future Senator. Let us take a quick break. David Crisafulli joins us after the break to talk about how Queensland is dealing with this crime that happened on the weekend. A woman who just went to the shops, grandkid in the car, and the kid ends up seeing their grandparent dying. We'll get to it in a second. The death of this 70-year-old woman in front of her 6-year-old granddaughter around Ipswich on Saturday night has shocked many people. Again, as police have spoken about this, there is no rhyme or reason to the crime. People are now before the court, so we're limited about what more we can say, but we all feel exactly the same thing. But there is a wider system here, which is the endless failures that have been happening in Queensland. They've had the same government for the best part of 27 of the past 30 years. The man hoping to change that later this year is the opposition leader, David Crisafulli, and he joins us now. David, yet again, another horrible case, yet again, a family completely ruined, and yet again, the government turns around and says, we feel your pain.
I'll tell you what, Paul, I went out there this morning to feel what the community was feeling, and it is really, really raw at the moment, mate. It really is. And the common theme that was coming from people was disappointment, anger, and just thoughts about a little girl who had to see something that no child should ever have to see, a family that's lost a grandmother, a mother, someone just going to the shops. How did we get here? How do we get here in Queensland that a trip to the shops can end up with you losing your life?
People's lives have been taken in Toowoomba, in Townsville, in Cairns, and for 48 hours it seems that everyone's on the same page, and then the news media might move on, but the communities stay affected for a long time. And it's not just about the people who end up losing their lives, the wider networks that get disrupted. It's the daily fear that people live with, and it's not just about their possessions. It's about their personal safety.
Paul, it's everyone, everywhere, every day. And it doesn't matter if it's in the far north of the state, down to the border, out to the Isa. Everywhere I go, people continue to raise with me this generation of repeat hardcore young offenders, the untouchables. And today the Premier said, oh, they should have the book thrown at them. The problem is the book. The book is the Youth Justice Act. That's the problem. And it's the state government that writes that act. And it's the state government that watered down that act. It was the first thing they did when they came to government in 2015. And on the back of it, you've just got a generation that is just marauding their way through Queensland. And it has had a direct correlation in the way that our police feel. So as a result, in the last 18 months, there are 322 fewer police today in Queensland. So you've got less police and weaker laws. What on earth does the government think is going to happen? It is just ripping the heart and soul out of a proud state, and the community has had enough. And I've had enough. And I can tell you, Paul, if we're given the privilege of governing in October, one of the first things we are going to do is rewrite that Youth Justice Act. And we are going to remove detention as a last resort. And early intervention is going to count for something. It's going to turn kids around. And the broken resi care system will be fixed. Things have to change.
Obviously, the other part of this question is judges. Now, mandatory sentencing becomes complicated for a lot of reasons, where you don't want somebody on the third strike for a minor crime to be given huge sentences as if they had committed a particularly serious offence. However, there are a group of people who are well and truly taking the proverbial and, for want of a term, getting away with it. So what, if anything, can the Parliament do under your control, under your government, to tighten the range that judges get to play in?
Yep. I've said consistently, we'll look at everything that can make our community safer. But I'll tell you one thing that I'm not for turning on, and that is day one, to remove the provision that says detention must be a last resort. And again today, the Premier said that they won't consider that. And that is wrong. While ever there's a provision in the Sentencing Act that says detention has to be a last resort, every time a young offender goes in front of a judge, every time, the overwhelming principle has to be that the detention has to be the last thing that's considered. Now, for some kids on that repeat merry-go-round, that's not the best thing for them or the community. So don't get me wrong, early intervention has to turn kids around. But in Queensland, the number of hardcore repeat offenders has gone from 10% to 20%. And as a result, we have more victims than ever before. It is a cocktail of misery, and it has to change. And I stand ready to do the changes to that Act to make our community safe again.
Well, Queensland, the option is clear. We'll keep talking to what we believe to be the better option between now and the election, and then hopefully beyond in a different capacity. Thank you very much, David. David Crisafulli is the opposition leader. Of course, there's by-elections as well. Please send a message to the Queensland government because they don't get it. They really don't get it, and they've got to go. More in a second. Get ready for the late debate. Tonight, Liz Storer celebrates Taylor Swift sweeping at the Grammys.
Get out.